What if I told you that a child could be trafficked for years, attend school every day, earn straight A's, smile in family photos, and almost no one would know? Welcome back to Rescued, Redeemed, Transformed, where we're exposing the true realities of what is happening here in America. We equip parents and communities to protect children and share stories of hope, healing, and redemption through the Lord Jesus Christ. Today's conversation is one you won't soon forget, so stay tuned. Our guest, Brea Burnett, she came out of child exploitation, and her powerful testimony offers a first-hand look into how traffickers groom and control children, why victims often remain hidden in plain sight, and how Jesus Christ brought healing, hope, and redemption in her life. So let's welcome Brea Burnett. Hello and welcome. Thank you, darling, for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited. As you know, behind the scenes, I was like, this is the story that people need to hear. This is what I think is truth and what needs to be exposed. So we're bringing light to the darkness today. So can we just get straight into your journey and your testimony and just find out what is going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything started around the age of 8 years old. My mom got a new boyfriend. He happened to be the local produce man at our little local grocery store. And from there, he began to come over and he would spend the night with us. And it didn't take long for them to start having sex in front of me. We were in a little trailer mobile home up on some property, and so at first I would sleep in the bathtub, but then eventually, sleeping in a bathtub doesn't work very well for too long. So then I moved where I was in sight of them having sex, and then eventually there would be nights where my mom was gone working and that sort of thing. And from there, he began to sexually abuse me, and it was soon after that he took me back to his house where there were a couple other guys and a couple other girls, and that's really where trafficking and exploitation began at the age of 8 years old. From there, guys started coming in, and I just thought that this was normal, that this was what life was about. And there were multiple times throughout being trafficked where I was pregnant and would either have a miscarriage or a forced abortion, usually by means of the abortion pill. And it was around the 6th grade where my mom had gotten a new boyfriend. The boyfriend that had originally trafficked me, he ended up kind of selling me to the other guys that were in the group. And so from there, my mom ended up getting a new boyfriend who wasn't overtly involved but was also complicit, and we ended up moving. And so because of that, when we ended up moving, I ended up going to a different group. And over the years that I was trafficked from the age of 8 until 17, I was with a total of 3 different groups. So each one looked a little bit different in the dynamics of how it all worked. And really, I just thought that this was normal. I thought that this was something that likely many girls were experiencing. I knew that probably it wasn't 100% that every girl had the exact same experience. But I even remember in the 3rd grade, I was talking with another girl from my class, and I can't remember the details of that conversation, but I can remember her and I talked, and we looked at each other, and we had some form of communication that was basically a mutual understanding that this was happening to both of us. And it came out years later that her dad had been abusing her from a very young age and raping her on almost a nightly basis up until the 6th grade. And so from there, I really thought that this was normal. I thought that this was what life was about, and I didn't know anything different. It was at the age of 16 where I had gone to a couple horse camps, and it was actually before 16. At the age of 13, I went to a camp, and while I was at that camp, they ended up doing, an altar call, and I had no idea what that was, but I just remember the pastor that was up there. He said, if you feel called, I want you to get up and I want you to walk. No, I want you to run to the front of the stage and give your life to Jesus. And as much as I remember those words, I had zero context to what they meant in the moment. And so I ended up running up there and I prayed this little prayer that they did. And it was at the end of the week that the camp counselors did, in fact, inform me that I had given my life to God at that camp. And so I decided to give God a 30-day free trial. as all, good Christians would. And of course, if you know anything about those 30-day free trials, you always forget to cancel your subscription. So a year later, I recommitted my life to the Lord, making an intentional decision to follow him at the age of 14. And it was from there that I think seeds were really more consistently started to be planted in my life, that maybe something different was possible. And I would say the Lord very much always had his hand of protection over me throughout all of the harsh things that I experienced. Just in the aspect that I don't feel like my heart was ever hardened. I feel like it was very much guarded with a desire and a sense of purity, and just knowing from a very young age that the life I had been exposed to was not the life that I wanted. And it was at the age of 16 where a friend that I had met at one of these camps asked me out to coffee. And so her and I got together, and she began to tell me this story about, like, she is, one of 7 daughters, so she has a bunch of sisters, and they were going to this local court hearing. And as they were walking in, they realized that her sister had a pocket knife in her pocket. And you cannot bring pocket knives into court hearings, right? You have to go through metal detectors. So they ran out and they shoved the pocket knife in the bushes. And that was kind of the funny story, that then I was like, well, why are you going to court? You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing there? And they ended up telling me that they were going to support a young gal who was going to be testifying against her trafficker that day. And I had no idea what trafficking was. And so when I asked, everything that she described as trafficking sounded very familiar to the life that I had known for the last, it was 8 years at that point. And so I decided to just really start thinking about what it would look like for me to tell somebody. And from there, I decided to just kind of tease the waters. And eventually, after a couple months, I told people, like, hey, this actually, happened when I was a kid. Because I was concerned, I didn't know if I was going to get in trouble with, law enforcement, or if people were going to judge me, what the Christians would think, all that kind of stuff. And so I teased the water, saying, oh, well, it happened, but only till the 6th grade. And from there, we began the process of talking with law enforcement and moving forward.
I would love for you to share that story, but can we go back a little bit? So the fact that this started at 8 years old breaks my heart. So you're the same age as my oldest daughter. And as a mom, I will look you straight in the face and tell you to bubba off if you even look sideways at my kid. So as all of this was happening, can we talk about, like, your mom? Obviously, you were already being sexualized just because you're watching what mom is doing. But does she know at all that you were being trafficked?
I believe that my mom was obviously aware once it started. And I would say that my mom she's not an aggressive person. She's not a mean person or anything like that. I think that she is a very broken person that gets in very broken relationships, and she's extremely passive. So with that, whatever guy she's with, that's who she embodies. I've seen her with guys that are more, like biker dudes, and she's wearing leather jackets. I've seen her with hippy dippy dudes, and she's very hippy dippy. And I've seen her with what I would say is more like a normal dude and be fairly normal. So it really ranges, and she just kind of morphs into whoever she's with. And the guy that she happened to be with at that time was not good. And so from there, I think she allowed a lot of things. And once he left and kind of sold me to the other guys, I don't think it was ever my mom's intention for any of that to happen, but she kind of painted this picture to the world, that she was this, like, super awesome single mom, and, like, we were just the best of friends and all this stuff. And so because of that, I think there was a decent chunk of her identity wrapped up in everyone's like, oh my goodness, like, you're doing so amazing. And so for her to be able to actually come forward and say, I majorly screwed up, and here's what happened, I just don't think she had the humility to come forward and say that, and to admit what she had allowed to happen to her daughter.
Yeah, that is such a key thing. Broken people attract brokenness. And I like how you said that. She basically was mimicking whoever she was with, and she was attracting. And until we are fully healed, which Jesus can heal us fully, we are going to attract those same things. So my guess is, I wonder, and you don't have to answer this question or not, but I wonder if she was abused as a child. For her to just go, okay, right? And her brokenness came from somewhere. And again, we're not excusing it, but we still have to walk in forgiveness. Wait, Lord, but we still have to walk in forgiveness towards them. So when you are 16 and your friend is describing what a traffic situation is and what a trafficker is, what was she saying to you that you said, aha, wait a minute, that is what's happening to me? What were some of the tall tale signs?
Yeah, I mean, it was extremely kind of point blank of that there are men who sell girl for sex. I mean, it's very simple. It's really not rocket science. And so, I mean, really hearing that, it was pretty obvious at that point.
Wow. I just can't imagine. So 8 years old starting all of this, and uh, again, my heart just breaks because I know that there's healing on the other side of this, but the fact that this is happening, wait, in America, what state are you living in at this point in time when you were 8 years old that it was happening? Here in America. I want to get that out there to the public. Here in America, not a foreign country, not because you came over the border, but here in America. What state were you in?
Washington State, born and raised, still currently in Washington State. So,
Wow. Okay. So when can we I want to go back to the question. Can you describe what trafficking is, just in case there's someone out there going, "Oh, wait a minute, that's what I'm going through." And so what does that look like? And how did these people groom you to where you trusted them enough to continue to do this? Because as we go further into your story, you were getting straight A's, you were going to school, and you were going to camp, and you were doing things outside of this, but you had to talk those people that were controlling you into letting you do some of these things. Can you describe some of that for me?
yeah, and I would start off with saying that the balance between trust and fear is intricately woven, right? So the more I feared them, the more they trusted me. So I think, and I'm happy to get into the details, but I also, it doesn't take our minds to be too creative to imagine what some of those situations had looked like, right? Obviously, there is the sexual abuse aspect and them doing whatever they wanted. Of course, there's a physical abuse aspect. You can use drugs, alcohol, and substances to force coercion and to force, obedience. At different points, there was a dog cage that they would use if they needed, or they could put one of us in a closet. And if there was ever any form of disobedience to them, there would typically be a correlating consequence. So I think it was very cut and dry. And again, like kids only know the life that they're exposed to, right? I heard something recently that said if you grow up in a house on fire, you think the whole world's on fire, right? You don't have that perspective outside of the home that you were raised in. So within that, I think it's a lot of the common things, really. I don't think it's anything super rocket science, but just force, fraud, and coercion.
Yeah, and so force, fraud, and coercion is usually where someone is. It could be exchanged for money. It could be exchanged for stuff. Again, food. Well, if you want to eat, you'll do this for me, and so forth. Now, can we talk a little bit about, because when you went to camp, how did you get to camp and away from these traffickers? Because this was something that was happening almost daily for you, correct?
At different times, so during different seasons, trafficking looked different. So there was kind of three different stages to break it up cleanly. There was from when it started until about sixth grade, and then after that I moved. So between seventh and ninth grade was a different season, and then 10th grade on, essentially. Kind of splits it up into the three different sections. So when I was younger in that first group, it was more of a consistent, regular, not quite daily, but almost to that extent basis. And then when I was in more of that middle school era, it was only really on the weekends to where my weeks were normal, but my weekends I would be trafficked. And then when I was older, it went back more to that, more so daily basis. From there, the reality is that like my biological dad, he did not know about any of this. So he was always a great excuse. And even though my mom did know and was involved, she wasn't actively involved necessarily. So because of that, like I would just tell them the truth. I say, hey, my parents signed me up for this camp. You know what I mean? I gotta go. That's just what life holds. And when you're in school, and schedules and all that kind of stuff, like that is just a part of it. And the older I got, so it looked different when I was younger. But one tactic as well that traffickers will use is to have victims participate in crimes at varying levels. So then if you've participated in any crime, now, they're like, hey, well, if anyone ever finds out, like, you're going to get in just as much trouble as I am in this situation. So from there, there's that kind of level of, and especially the older I got, I would say the more I was forced to be involved in different crimes. And because of that, they knew that I was fairly bought in, right? And I would do anything that they told me. I was never one to really fight back. I knew that it was just safer to do whatever they told me to, and so that's how I moved forward.
With them having you participate in these crimes, how did you feel about law enforcement? Again, why would you come forward if you're scared that you're going to be arrested? How did you feel about just the law enforcement and the teams that were actually wanting to protect you, but
Yeah. Law enforcement to me was a death sentence if I ever went, especially because at the age of 8, so when I was first starting out, the traffickers I was with, they actually brought in someone who, whether or not he was a real law enforcement officer, I will never know. But he came in and he took each one of us girls into a room separately and asked us questions. And two of us didn't tell, one of us did. And to the one that did, she actually ended up being murdered as a result of sharing what was going on. And obviously that was done, in front of the other girl and I, to where we knew that if we ever told law enforcement, it was a death sentence. Whether law enforcement is on their side, whether law enforcement would arrest us, it didn't really matter. We just knew that law enforcement was not to be messed with. You weren't to go anywhere near law enforcement. And they instilled that over time. But that would, I say, would be the most kind of dramatic moment of that in that climax.
it sounds like they put safety in the fear of causing you to be fear. You felt safer being afraid of them than going outside of the trafficking situation for help. Um, Man, I would like to talk a little bit about that a little further, but I want to go ahead and continue with your testimony. Now you're 16 and you're going, aha, wait a minute, all of this is happening to me. What happened from there?
Yeah, so that's where I decided that if I wanted to get out of the life I had known for so long, that I was gonna have to start somewhere. I also had known that the plan was for me when I turned 18 to actually go down to California because the group that I was with dealt specifically only in minors, so in children, not in adults. And so the plan was for when I turned 18 that I was going to go down to California and go into essentially like full-time sex work as an adult. Because of that, I knew that I needed to kind of start that process sooner rather than later if I did ever want to get out. And because I had been introduced to the Lord, I knew that there was maybe a different life out there. So it was some months later after someone told me about what trafficking was, I decided to test those waters. And that's when I began to kind of tease people with information about trafficking and said, hey, well, it happened, but only up until the 6th grade when I moved. And then it was over. Just to see how they would respond, I was like, oh, there's no way they'll make me go to law enforcement. Lo and behold, they did make me go to law enforcement, which was terrifying. And so then here I was in law enforcement while actively being trafficked. Everyone thinks it's a thing of the past. I didn't want to give my name. I didn't want to give any identifying information. I didn't want to be there. And it was absolutely terrible. So law enforcement, I went in with a support person. After about maybe 30 minutes, they said they needed to take my support person out. And then another minute or two later, another officer came in. We were in an interrogation room. There was the double-sided glass behind me. The second person that came in, they had said that they had been listening to everything I had said so far. So now I have no idea who else is maybe behind that glass listening. And from there, they really started to interrogate me and ask me questions. And, oh, well, when did this happen? And, oh, well, when did you get your period? Well, if that's when you got your period, then you must have gotten pregnant, right? Did you ever get pregnant? Well, if you got pregnant, what happened to the baby? What, like so on and so forth. And just question after question after question, taking the conversation to so many places that I didn't want to go. And it was terrible. And they locked my support person out in the waiting room and would not let them back in. And they ended up interrogating me essentially for 2 to 3 hours, trying to tear my story apart. And from there, I was like, never want to do that again. The person I was with couldn't believe that that's how it had gone. They assumed that law enforcement was going to take it great, and they did not. And so from there, I was like, that was awful, terrible, never want to do that again. But lo and behold, a couple months later, I was like, I think I was 17 maybe at that point, and I knew that if I wanted to leave, that I was going to have to pull the trigger and tell people that it was still actively happening. And so I did, and they were like, well, we got to go back to law enforcement again. And I was like, you are kidding me. No, thank you. But they were like, we went in with some kind of guardrails that time, and my support person was like, no matter what, I'm not going to leave the room. Like, I'm with you this whole time. Like, I'll call and specifically say, like, not in an interrogation room. So we ended up meeting in someone's like office type space, and I had written out a timeline of everything that had happened and to bring in so I didn't have to recount my entire story. And basically, that law enforcement officer gave me two options. Option number one, that I could do anything they said, whenever they said it, however they said it, be willing to show up at any court hearing, so on and so forth, or I could drop it. And of course, I didn't want to be there. And if anyone knew I was there, it would definitely be a death sentence. So I was like, I will happily drop it. I didn't want to be here in the first place. And my support person agreed that law enforcement obviously was not going to be helpful. And from there, law enforcement actually ended up calling my biological mom and telling her about everything that I had said in my interview. And she ended up calling all of my biological family, which caused quite the ruckus.
So when you're in the second interrogation, because it's still an interrogation, they were literally using the same tactics as the trafficker and groomers. The same tactics. They're not trying to help you. They are giving you ultimatums, and they're forcing you. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, this is how the innocent.org was even birthed, was your story. Which we'll get into that a little bit later, but right, it was partly.
Yes and no. Nate had a lot of his own personal experience from work that he had done overseas. So it wasn't necessarily as a result of my story by any means, but my story does perfectly tie into what we do, why we do it, and the need for law enforcement to be trained in sex trafficking and exploitation, to be trained in proactive work. And there's also some pretty cool tie-ins with law enforcement I ended up connecting later on, and the innocent team as well.
That is amazing. I often tell people, I was talking to a Dallas PD one time, and I was talking to him about trafficking, and he says, those girls want to be there. And I go, no, they don't. And he says, no, they want to. And, and they treat them a certain way. And they might say something like, oh, hey, I'm just trying to finish college and get my degree, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I literally told him, I think you need to be better educated on the fact that they're not being trafficked and they're being forced. And again, nobody wants, nobody. I think I would say that there's one person that I can think of, Annie Lebert, who said, oh no, I put myself into trafficking because I thought it was fun, all about the money. But nobody really wants all those men laying on top of them. It's not fun. It's not fun. It's meant to be in a relationship between a wife and a husband, and it's supposed to be beautiful. So I want to say shame on those cops. Shame on those cops for making you more, right, where they just continue to victimize you. And we had talked about this before even hitting record. You're not a victim and you're not a survivor. You're an overcomer. But the fact that they were continuously doing the same thing that the traffickers. Shame on them. Like, we need to educate ourselves. Police departments, educate yourselves. And there's a lot of departments are working at it. I know that theinnocent.org and your team, you and Nate and your team, are working with law enforcement all over the United States. And there are ways for people to be kind of like the person that went in with Brea, that sat with her to expose the trafficker. But you guys basically educate people of how can you protect the child and educate the law enforcement. Okay, so sorry, I had to go on that rant. It makes me so mad. And most people know that, again, my story, we all have skin in the game. I do what I do, and I protect children and people, and I walk through healing with people because my sister was trafficked, and then I was abused by at least 5 different abusers. And there are things that I remember that I've never shared publicly, but because I just don't feel that I need to. But it's like we have skin in the game, and we need to protect our kids. It's happening in America. Okay, so here they go. You go in, and they give you an ultimatum: either give us everything or just go. And what happens? You left.
Yep, I'm set. I'm out. Sounds good to me. Don't want to deal with that anymore. But yeah, they called my biological family, and so they ended up, then I'm having all these other members of my biological family call me that hadn't known my story. And the reality is like that phone call could have been a death sentence, because if any of the traffickers had found out, or if my mom had told them that I had gone to law enforcement, there is no doubt in my mind that I would have been murdered. Murder was not an uncommon thing with the groups that I was surrounded in. And so I knew that at that point, after law enforcement had been told, which I was already at that point, but I knew that it was like now or never of me needing to leave and to get out of the life that I had known. And so from there, because there was so much trust with the traffickers that I was involved with, because I had been in it for so long, done anything they had told me to do at any point, I was essentially able to just drive away. And I moved, I changed my phone number, and just kind of disappeared off of their radar, which was more or less successful. So I ended up moving in with an old teacher and her husband, and that's where I started, kind of just getting my feet wet again and all that kind of stuff. I did end up getting called in as a runaway during that time from my biological dad, and that was a whole complicated scenario, and cops picked me up, and I got put in the back of the cop car with handcuffs as a runaway, even though, because I had gone to CPS and told them my situation and why I needed to move, and they told me that was great. And then next thing I know, cops are showing up saying that my dad is threatening to file an at-risk youth petition on me, and that no, I couldn't leave, even though and I handed him the CPS worker's business card and was like, here's the guy that told me to do this. Like, now you're saying I shouldn't have done this. And it ended up working out in the end, and I was able to move in with that teacher and her husband. And so lived there for a little bit until her husband began to make some advances on me. And so then I needed to leave, and I was very thankful. It was the first time that I really, in a moment, kind of stood up for myself, even though, that wasn't actually my motivation. That was just the first time that I saw the other person, behind a man making poor choices, right? Lots of guys during the years would come in and have ring on their fingers, but obviously I never knew their wives. I figured their wives probably didn't know that they were there. But, living with the teacher and her husband, I was very close with my teacher. And so I didn't want to be responsible for hurting their marriage by allowing the husband's advances to go on. And so I ended up moving, and I was homeless at the age of 17, and homeless for about 2 months before I was able to move over to Eastern Washington. So I was trafficked in Western Washington and then moved over to Eastern Washington. And that's where I was able to start working at a horse camp that I had attended on just a weekly basis before, but live there full time and kind of get some distance from the people of my past and start figuring out life at 17 years old.
Wow. And I happen to know your story, so and I want to make sure I get all the questions that could be running through someone's head. But how did this affect you? So now you're 17 and you're just living a normal life. what you now figured, oh, this is what normal is supposed to feel like. I'm assuming, because that in the past was your normal, and now you see that it's different. How did this affect your life, your adulthood, your decision making? How did this make you operate through life?
Yeah, I would say first of all, because of everything, I felt super alone because I knew no one anymore with the same experience. And also, all of the other children I was with, there were some of them that one of the gals that was actually in that last group was also with me in the first group that I was in. And so there were relationships that I was leaving behind. My life was very, I say all the time, you could take trafficking completely out of my story and it would still be a very hard story. And so because of that, I was leaving the only people that had actually kind of been consistent in my life throughout a lot of that time, because trafficking was the one consistent thing throughout moving and changing schools and different boyfriends and girlfriends for my biological parents. And so I think it was super lonely. Plus, I was on my own at 17, kind of expected to figure out and take on the world, and I didn't know where I was going to live because I legally could not sign a lease at 17, but I had nowhere to go, and I couldn't really maintain relationships with my biological family because they were connected to, my biological mom, who then was connected to the traffickers. So I didn't want anyone to know super where I was or what I was doing or maintain much contact. So it was very isolating. And in addition to that, now that I was finally out of it, I think I started to begin to really, take the baby steps in working through everything and telling people what had happened throughout all those years. And memories started to come back up of things that I had forgotten in the past. But now that I was out, because I also had some pretty, I didn't know it fully at that point, or have maybe the terminology for it, but I had some pretty bad disassociation. And so because of that, and I think that was really a saving grace from the Lord. But when I left trafficking at 17, I remember I could go and, work all night and then wake up the next morning and I couldn't tell you what had happened the night before. And so I began to write down in my journal, that way I could read it the next morning to start kind of recrossing those wires in my brain, and for those two different sides of me to be able to connect and have more cohesive memories, enough to be able to leave and understand what was still actively happening. And so I began to tell people what had been going on. And then I also really struggled with PTSD. Nightmares specifically have been a very big thing for me. So not to flash forward too much, but I'm 24 now, have been out of the life for 7 years, and I've had 13 nights without nightmares. Every other night I've still had a nightmare. And so I keep a running total. And so I think the PTSD aspect, that first year or two, I would say I was super fearful. Like, this guy's looking at me in the grocery store for too long. And in addition, while being trafficked, used for things such as child porn, or because we were children, child sexual abuse material. And so knowing that there's likely content of me out there being abused as a child, and what if someone ever recognized me, right? I have no idea. Anyone I walk by could have seen a video of me being assaulted. And so from there, I think it was just very isolating, felt very lonely, and then was dealing with all these things without a whole lot of guidance, because I never ended up going through an official program. I had people that loved and cared about me and mentors, but never went through anything official. So I think it was really just wading through that.
Uh, okay, I'm writing everything down so that I don't forget, and there's things that I want to say off camera. But regarding the nightmares, I know the fix to that. I know the fix to that, because there's healing on the other side of this through Jesus, but we will talk about that later. So tell me, how did you get involved with innocent.org? I'm probably going to go back and forth on some questions, but how did you end up getting involved in innocent.org? And tell us more about it and how innocent.org is helping children of America. Because again, this is happening in America.
Yeah, absolutely. There is one part of my story that's kind of essential to be able to get to the innocent. So I'll fast forward from where I'm at 17. I end up moving in with a host family. Then I got an apartment. And so then I'm at this apartment in the town that I currently live in. And I had been going to a church, and that church decided that they were going to do a Bible school, and I wanted to participate. And so from there, a local family actually ended up offering to host me for very cheap rent during the duration of the program. And that family actually ended up adopting me 5 months later at the age of 20 years old. So I got adopted. At the time, my now dad, Brea Burnett, he was the local elected sheriff of our county. Current day, he's a state representative. And then it was also during that time that one of my brothers, but it was actually mostly before he was my brother, he had heard about, that there was this gal in the valley who had been trafficked, heard about my story, and encouraged me to try law enforcement one more time. And I had a very redeeming experience with a law enforcement officer that he had connected me with. And I'll touch back on that, but that's kind of a key point of how working for the innocent has been such an amazing experience. But so, fast forward, I'm working for a women's clinic, nonprofit, and I went to, I think, go pick up coffee for the gals at the team, and I saw this flyer in the coffee shop for a sex trafficking awareness event in the area. And so from there, I told my dad about it, and I was like, oh, I think I'm going to go to this. And my dad's like, oh, I know the organizer. And so he gives her a call and says, hey, I wanted to hear about this event. And she kind of told him the lineup, and he was like, not very impressive. He's like, if you want law enforcement there, you need to have Brian Lewis, who is an officer here from our area. He's like, you need to have him come speak. And he's like, I don't know if you know, but my daughter was trafficked, and told her a little bit of my story. And that was actually the first time that my dad ever told somebody without asking me first. So it's just kind of funny looking back, because that's when it was a little more hush hush. So, and kind of threw my name in the hat and threw an officer that he had hired as a lateral to the agency that he was running at the time. So we end up speaking at this event, and at this event there also is a guy named Nate Lewis who ends up speaking, representing a different organization at the time. And it was at that event really where the innocent was born, because we were doing a Q&A after we had all spoken, and someone in the crowd asked, what can we do here locally? And as Nate would say, it just kind of clicked, and he said, we're going to start a fundraiser. You guys are going to fund it. We have Brian here with his local agency, and you guys are going to raise the funds, and we're going to get Brian the tools that he needs to be able to proactively investigate these types of crimes. And so then I think from there, Nate and Brian kind of got connected and started pursuing the innocent. And then it was, I think, probably a year and a half later, where my dad had made a post on Facebook, and I saw about it. About the innocent, and that they were focused 100% in the United States on proactive investigations. And literally that's all I saw. One video, I was like, sign me up as a monthly donor. So I signed up. I want to say I think I looked it up at one point, and I was like the 13th donor. I don't know if that was monthly or just one time. But so I was right there in the beginning of the innocent's history, and Nate sent me a text message, and it was like, hey, oh my goodness, I can't believe you're supporting that. So awesome. And I was like, hey, super serious. Let me know what I can do to help. I'm all in. This is what I'm all about. And so Nate and I started talking and figuring out, okay, what could I do? Sharing a little bit more of my story with him offline. I ended up doing a podcast with him where he heard a lot more of my story. And what was super cool is I had mentioned briefly that I had a positive experience with law enforcement, right? And basically, when I showed up, it was also super comical, because this law enforcement officer is a huge dude, just straight Viking build. And I remember when he walked in to meet, we were meeting at our church, he actually had his leg in a cast. He had just broken 2 bones in his foot or ankle or something. And I was so thankful, because I was like, if nothing else, I can outrun this guy out of here in a heartbeat. I'm solid. And basically that law enforcement officer just said, we believe you, and it might be hard, but we're going to be here to walk alongside you in the process. And was able to, he couldn't work the case because it wasn't in his jurisdiction, but passed me off to the FBI and kind of be able to talk with them. But what's super cool about that is that was such a redeeming moment to have law enforcement say, I believe you. And, I think it wasn't until Nate and I were talking about me working for the innocent that I was like, oh, and this is so cool, because, the role that Brian Lewis played in my story. And Nate just goes, wait, what? What did you say? And I was like, well, right, that Brian Lewis, who's the COO for the innocent and one of the trainers, who was also at that event that we all spoke at in the beginning where everything was started, he was the officer that I had the positive experience with. You knew that, right? And he had no idea. So he didn't even know the connection between Brian and I prior to me basically getting hired on for the innocent. And so from there, started working for the innocent 10 hours a week, and progressed, and as of January, been working full time, and it's, July now. So it's been about 6 or 7 months, and it's been super awesome. And I would say that I am just so thankful. I used to pray all the time. Anyone who knows me has known that since I got out, I was like, I want to work for, an anti-sex trafficking organization. And I mean, I don't love that anti-sex trafficking, because what are we for? We're for innocence, right? But for lack of a better term, I want to work for an anti-sex trafficking organization. I want to be a part of making a difference. And I joke all the time that I'm very thankful that the Lord was more specific in answering my prayers than I was in praying them. Because not all organizations are created equal, and not all organizations are making equal amount of impact. And they're, without speaking negatively of organizations, a lot of aftercare facilities aren't always what they say they are in the true impact that they're making, because aftercare is super challenging. It really is, between, the finances and then these girls' PTSD, nightmares, drug addictions. There are very few aftercare agencies that are actually equipped to handle the needs of these survivors that are coming out, especially like adult versus children. It's even harder with children to be able to provide that kind of support. So, and then awareness organizations, it takes more than awareness. Awareness is a great first step, but before working for the Innocent, had actually unintentionally started my own little organization. And I remember Nate and I were talking, and I told him, I said, Nate, like, if you ever want me to go full time, you just say the word and my old organization's gone. Like, what I've been doing is done. Because I was really just speaking and sharing my story, but there was no point to it. And that's coming from someone who was a victim of child sex trafficking, sharing my story. So it's like, if there is valid awareness, that would be it. But I was like, there's no point. We're not it takes a secondary action step of someone giving to like an organization like the Innocent that's making boots on the ground impact. So all that being said, super thankful that the Lord was more specific in answering my prayers than I was in praying them, because I truly believe, and I say this like not even as a representative of the Innocent, but like the reason why I work for the Innocent is because I believe that the Innocent truly does have the potential to change the trajectory of our nation in regards to child sexual abuse and trauma. Not even just trafficking, like yes, trafficking and exploitation, but also child abuse, because these officers are working proactively to investigate these kinds of crimes, which has really not been a model that has been leaned into very much in the past. And so I'm just super thankful to be a part of the team and what we're doing, and with the fact that we have active duty law enforcement officers on staff as trainers, because you have to have credibility to walk into a law enforcement agency. And it's just been so fun to see how the Lord has totally woven together the team, from Nate's past experience to, Brian being an officer that was critical in my story, and, the fact that my dad, when I got adopted, was the current elected sheriff and now is a state representative. So we have an avenue to make legislative change as well. And I mean, there's story after story after story that I could say about how each member of the Innocent team is clearly there by the Lord, and just the model of what we're doing. It truly is unique, and I believe it really is the only form of prevention. I mean, you can always talk with kids and tell them and equip them like, hey, here are traps that might be out there to not fall into. But the reality is that kids are kids, and they're gonna make mistakes. And we shouldn't put the burden on kids to be educated or to speak up. We should put the burden on adults to prevent abuse from happening and to stand up on behalf of these kids. And I really believe that is what the Innocent is doing, is giving the people of America an avenue to step in and to get involved, to keep their money in their community, to train their local law enforcement, to be working in these investigations proactively in their community, which isn't just protecting kids in their community, but is also protecting kids across the nation. Because we have all the time in our trainings where, it's a guy reaching out from across the country looking to meet up, with a minor from, the other side, where there's, hundreds of, there's thousands of miles in between them, but yet that child could still be victimized by a predator across the country. And so that's what's so impactful about our model, is that yes, it affects the local, but it also affects the national. And when we have officers trained across the nation that can all be working together towards this, it really is going to make America a safer place for our children.
I love that. Just so the audience knows, you can go back and watch Guarding the Next Generation with Nate Lewis, where we'll see his side of the story. We'll see what he tells more about the impact of what they're doing, and he tells some stories. So I would agree with you. There's a lot of places out there that says, hey, we're going to rescue, but then it's really messy and it takes time. My ministry, we walk one-on-one with gals. I don't have a home. I let them come to my home, and we work one-on-one. And I am like very happy to get into the mess. And I feel like there is a lot of organizations that don't know how to walk through the messy part, right? And so it's really great. I love what the innocent.org is doing. And I say the innocent.org so you know where to go. But our RT Ministries has partnered big time with them, and we're going to continue to support the whole gamut of this organization and the ministry, because protecting our kids is the most important thing. So yes, awareness is great, but what we can get there beforehand, we can get there through law enforcement, and it is okay to jump into the messiness with people. I love that the innocent.org is literally equipping law enforcement and everyday average Joes how to protect kids. I love it. So can I ask, since you said you were adopted by your dad and you obviously have taken his last name, what has happened with your mom and your biological mother and father? I believe that I can speak for this on you. I know you have forgiven them and you walk in forgiveness. But forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in relationship with people, because sometimes it's just not safe. But what has happened with your biological parents?
Yeah, so with my biological parents, my biological mom and I have very little relationship. We do have some, and that is because I have a little sister. She's a half sister that is 14 years younger than me, so she's 10 years old right now. I don't believe by any standard that she is being trafficked, because, like I said, my mom is kind of a chameleon to whoever she's with, and the guy that she's currently with, I don't believe would be involved in something like that. He's very much kind of a narcissist, control freak. And he actually came into my life when I think I was like 12 years old or so. He never sexually or physically abused me, just very verbally abusive. And he would be of the mindset, if someone's going to abuse my kid, it's going to be me. Very terrible, but true. So within that, I highly doubt that my little sister would end up being trafficked. So I do maintain relationship for my little sister's sake, because I don't think she'll make it to 18 in their home, just because of, the verbal abuse from my stepdad. So I want to be open in a place that she knows her sister well enough to know that she could come to me, especially once she gets old enough to have like a phone and more independent communication. And then with my biological dad, he and I do actually maintain a relationship ever since getting adopted. He has wanted to pursue a relationship a lot more. And so I've done that. It is a little bit of a ticking time bomb feeling, because he does not believe that anything has happened, trafficking and exploitation wise. And he does not really know what I do for work either. The other day he asked me, he's like, "What do you do for work again?" I was like, "Oh, I help out some nonprofits and that sort of thing." He's like, "Oh, what's the name?" And I straight up was like, I'm not gonna tell you." And so anyway, so it's a little bit of I joke, I call it impending doom there, but we'll see how that shakes out. But other than that, our relationship is in a decent place. But I just don't think he wants to admit that. I mean, and what father would, right? Like, it's not necessarily his fault, but also fathers are meant to protect their children, and especially their daughters. And so the fact that he was not able to protect me, is a burden that probably weighs heavy on his heart, in a way that he would not want to admit necessarily, that, or like believe that all of that would have happened. So there is some relationship, but not a whole lot of relationship, especially because like my family needs are like completely met by the family that I got adopted into. So I have a mom and a dad, and then I actually have five brothers, one sister, and all of the brothers are older than me. So I think four of them are married, if my quick math is right. And so I have currently 12 nieces and nephews born, and one's going to be here any day, and then another one will be due this fall. So just lots of family, lots of connection, which is just such a blessing.
I love how the Lord has turned what was meant to destroy you, what was evil, for his glory and for his good. Whatever happened with the traffickers when you went to the cops and you said, "This is what's happening to me"? Whatever happened to them?
Yeah, unfortunately, at the time, especially with where my memory was, there just wasn't enough information to prioritize building a case, right? Law enforcement has huge caseloads, and the amount of evidence that I was able to provide was just not enough for them to be able to pursue anything at the time. So hopefully, Lord willing, one day another guy will come forward from that same group, and then there might be enough evidence to be able to move forward. But unfortunately, there has been no justice that I am aware of.
Okay, but God is a God of justice, and it's going to be either here, there, or in the air, I like to say, right? Totally. Um, I know I have more questions for you. I just want you to know that more than anything, I really appreciate you being here. And, there's a little bit of vulnerability that happens when you're sharing this story and you're sharing the journey that you've been on. So thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. I could tell you have come a tremendously long way in your healing journey for you even to be able to talk about it, because there's some ladies that I get to walk with and they grit their teeth and they can't even say the names of some of their abusers. So I appreciate you being here, and thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to the innocent.org, who is going out and equipping law enforcement. Again, this is happening in America. So I have a question, and this might be triggering for somebody, but I want to get to the root. Who in their right mind? Now, again, men and women can be abusers. Boys and girls get trafficked. Um, More girls than boys, but men and girls get trafficked too. I have one guy on my list that I work with who has come out of some serious abuse in that way, but it happens. What man, what person in their right mind does this to an 8-year-old little girl? What is the root cause for you, or do you think it is?
Totally. Well, I think from my personal Christian perspective, of course, we live in a fallen world. So there is always that as a kind of, starting place. But then also, I mean, I think the pornography industry is just the biggest fueler, and also Hollywood, how we dress, how we act, what we market our kids. Social media has made it, I think, increasingly worse with just the sexualization of our children. But I would say, for my personal perspective, pornography is the root cause, and also just a form of like generational sin, because it happened before and it wasn't spoken about. So no one's ever really stepped up to deal with it and to talk through what's going on and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think because of that, that's a big factor in it, of people watching porn and then they get a dopamine hit, and then that isn't excuse me, isn't enough, and so then they need more, and then they need younger, and then they need younger, and that sort of thing. So I think that the pornography industry is just the biggest fueler of the human trafficking industry, for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Because one thing is not enough. They need to keep going to the next level because it doesn't meet their dopamine um, highs. And Dr. Kathy, she's one of my mentors, and hopefully one day she'll come on. But she's like, there's only one addiction, and that addiction is to dopamine. It's not necessarily to drugs. It's not necessary. It's what those things do for you, which is we're addicted to the dopamine. And I just want to say, there's nothing like the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ, where it hits the dopamine triggers in our brain, and it's like, man, you are enough. You are enough, God. I love this. I actually want to tell you, as we're talking through it, and I'm going, I have a program. I literally wrote it down in my notes where I wanted to show you, like, I have the program, and you're hitting a lot of the key things that we walk through in the program. So I'd love to do it with you. We call it the Great Exchange. I'm actually going to be doing filming for it so that it can get out to people for free. And so it's like, man, there's healing on the other side of that, whether you have been trafficked, abused, verbally abused, emotionally abused, sexually abused. There is healing on the other side of that. And God only wants you to walk in a life of abundance. That's what he said I came for, that you would know peace and that you would have life more abundantly. And that means safety, security, contentment, health, wealth, prosperity, establishment, and you're better than you're now. So here's, we'll close it up here soon. And I think you should come back on and share more. I would love to hear more. And I'd love to hear the more on the impact that you're having with what you're doing at innocent.org. But what does it look like? So are you dating? Are you married? Or you're like, I'm still kind of not ready for that, all that?
I am super single, super ready to get married. Don't really have any prospects, but so hey, if there's a solid single young man that loves the Lord and has a heart, feel free to reach out. But no, yeah, single, but very excited for marriage. My church speaks very, very highly of marriage and of intimacy and all the things to where I have little to no concern about moving forward. And I am very traditional in my current day and age, so I know how to cook and clean and can and garden and crochet and knit and quilt and any domestic homemaking hobby you can think of. I have at least dabbled in it, if not pretty sufficient. So I love all the things, and I look forward to, if the Lord allows, one day to getting married. And I think I would love nothing more than to be a stay-at-home mom and raise babies. And I just believe that that is the most amazing things for gals to be able to do, and that's an extremely high calling. And in the meantime, I can totally see the Lord's plan and purpose on my life to be able to be working with the innocent and making impact and sharing my story.
I love that. So, really quick side question. Your adopted family, the Burnett family, did they happen to homeschool their 6 children?
They did. Yep. So
Uh,
all
yeah,
six
I
of the
could.
kids were homeschooled, and yep, all that jazz.
Okay. That is why she can and knit and crochet and all those things, because I'm a homeschool mama. I raised 2 girls. I homeschooled them, and there are things that they can do that the average everyday gal cannot do. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't like to cook. I love to bake, but I can spot a homeschooler a mile away. They could be the most coolest, but I'm like, I know you were homeschooled.
That does come more from me personally, though, because my mom knows some of those things, but she definitely doesn't know all of them. So there's often times where I will go and teach my mom, oh, here's how you do sourdough or ginger bug or all these crazy crazy things. But yeah, I love that the Lord has made women to keep and maintain, and I love feeding people and blessing people in that capacity. And I mean, I think there was really a point too where I was coming out of trafficking where I had to redefine, like, what is a woman? You know what I mean? Because I didn't know what a woman, I wore baggy clothes. Like, just didn't really care. I didn't want to look attractive in any capacity. And I think there was a point where someone told me, it's like, no, like, God made women to be beautiful, both in heart, mind, and character. And so because of that, it was like, oh, okay, well, if women are supposed to be beautiful, then I should be seeking out that beauty in my home and in how I dress and in how I act, and to have a quiet and gentle spirit. I used to be kind of a domineering personality type. And so for me to kind of take that step back and be just more quiet and gentle, and to be settled in that, because I know what a woman is supposed to be. And I think that women have a unique ability to comfort and to bless. And I think so much of that can be through the kitchen and through acts of service in a unique way, specifically to gals. And of course, guys could do it too, but I think gals definitely have a unique knack for it. And so I think leaning into that has been super healing for me as well.
I would agree with you. I happen to have married, and let's go back to the key point when and what you're looking for. A man of God who first and foremost loves Jesus with all his heart, because if he loves Jesus with all his heart, he's going to love you, right? But I had a husband that was like, no, I want my wife to be able to stay home if that's what she wants, and we're going to raise our kids. And to this day, this is why I do what I do for free. I'm like, okay, how can I walk with people, and in their healing journey, because my husband provided it for me. He was a man. And I love how you defined what a woman is. There's some people that can't define what a woman is. Man, oh man, I can't think of any other questions that I think other people would ask. Um, oh yes, here we go. If you could tell parents regarding, because some of the parents, they don't know any better. They might not know the Lord. They might even come out of abuse, but there's something that needs to be said to parents. What would you say to them to help little Brees all over the world, and maybe little, I don't know, Barneys all over the world, both boys and girls get trafficked? What would you say to those parents?
I would say that conversation and relationship are your best friends in regards to connecting with your kids. The other thing is with trafficking, there's kind of two different categories of parents, I would say, and this sounds maybe harsh, but there are good parents and there are bad parents, right? My parents, unfortunately, would be, my biological parents would be in the category of bad parents, to where, obviously there was a level of complicity and that sort of thing. But I would reason to guess that most people listening to this, and so I'll speak to that audience, would be in the category of good parents, or at least parents with good intentions. And so because of that, right, you as a parent obviously are not going to traffic your child because you love and care about them. So the things that you need to be more aware of for your child to not be victimized are especially with technology and the people that are around you. And so I think the biggest thing is if you can have conversations with your kids to where if anything ever happens, they can come forward. They know that they're not going to be in trouble. And you respond and have a history of responding when your child messes up and comes to you with that mistake, to be able to respond in love and grace and to not get mad, especially with the rise of technology. I think technology is probably the biggest threat that our kids have. Of course, there's still in-person risk, and so that's why having those prepping conversations of if anything ever happens, like you can come to me, you're never going to be mad, it's not going to be your fault, all of that stuff. But also with technology as well, is preparing your kids, because the reality is at some point they're probably going to end up with a phone and with social media, and with that comes a lot of dangers, and you can't prepare them for every situation that's going to come up on their cellular device. What you can do is you can prepare their heart to respond to any situation that comes up in a way that allows them to come back and to talk to you as the parent, so you can wade through it together, whether or not they made a mistake and they sent a photo to somebody and now they're trying to extort them because your child sent a photo of themselves, or whether it wasn't even a fault of their own, but they have a guy reaching out to them, soliciting them for sex. The statistics in 1 in 5 kids will be solicited for sex before the age of 18 online. And so because of that, I think conversation and relationship, filling your kids' tanks, especially, dads with daughters, dads, if your daughter knows that you love them and you've told them their worth, they're going to be so much less likely to be susceptible to falling for some sleaze bag who has ill intentions for them, because you as their dad have showed them what their worth is. So I think, yeah, relationships and conversations are your best friend.
Man, I don't think I could have said it any better. I think I will have to. I think one of the things that Nate and I want to do is, again, have conversation of how to protect your kids. How do you protect them on social media? How do you protect them when they go to school? How do you protect them when they're at friends' houses? And so forth. I think we'll have to have a whole nother podcast just for that. Bree, I just want you to know I am so proud of you. Again, I take it very personally. You're the same age as my daughter, and then I have a younger daughter. And I just want you to know I'm really proud of you. And listening to your journey and all those things, and seeing what God has already done, and how you were able to stand up and fight for those who can't fight for themselves again. And you do it with such grace. I'm really proud of you. Thank you so much for being here. I think we're going to have you come back on again. But I just want you to know I really appreciate you. And thank you for bringing light to the darkness that is out there. And again, I'm sorry that all those things happened to you, but I see how God is using it for his glory, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and for, yeah, sharing about the work that we do at The Innocent and allowing me to share my story, which is hopefully just fuel in the fire for people to be able to get involved and to take action.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out how to get more involved and say, I want to help, I want to find out what it means to be a team member of the innocent.org, or you want to find out how to be a team member with RRT Ministries, go to innocent.org or go to rrtministries.org, and there is something that you could do, because we all have skin in the game, whether it is somebody you knew that went through it, whether you went through it, or it's just a story that impacted you. You can make a difference. So, hey, y'all, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Comment how Bree's story has encouraged you and lit a fire under you for you to do something, because it's happening in America. Okay, and so before we go, Bree, will you please pray us out? And can we have a warfare prayer? I have a feeling you know how to do warfare prayers against this principality that is over America, that is really stealing our children. Yeah, can you pray us out, sweetie?
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, we just come before you today, Lord, and we ask that first of all, that you would just comfort all the hearts listening to this, Lord. I know that this is a heavy topic, God, but I pray that you would allow us to step into the uncomfortableness that is this topic, Lord. And I pray that you would give people boldness to step up, Lord. I pray that you would place callings on their hearts and on their minds, God, and I pray that you would allow this conversation to propel them into action, God, because our children are worth it, Lord. And we pray against the schemes of the devil and the schemes of the enemy, Lord, and the principalities and the powers of darkness that be, God. And I pray that you would just send your warring angels to protect over these children, Lord, and that you would place a unique hand of protection over their heart, just like I know you did in my life, Lord, and that no matter what circumstances may come their way, Lord, that you would guard their heart to be pure towards you, Lord, and to not be bitter and not to be angry, Lord, but and allow it. I pray that you would allow them to come to you, God, and that you would just be with them in every moment that they're going through, Lord. And I pray that you would be with, again, the people that are listening here today, and that you would encourage them to action, God, and that you would give us hope, Lord. There is hope in this. Every battle has already been won by you, Lord. You have already won the war. It's just a matter of how are we getting to that finish line. So I pray that you would allow us to trust you, Lord, and I pray that you would just bless both RRT Ministries, Lord, and the innocent, God, because we are all on a trajectory to protect these children from horrific abuse that they are experiencing, Lord. Allow us to step in the gap, Lord. Give us eyes to see the people that we are around, Lord, and give us ears to listen to conversations, God, to be able to step in and to intervene and to be a light to those that are around us, God, and to step in on behalf of those who are hurting and to bear each other's burdens and to really be a light in the darkness, Lord. And I thank you for everyone listening here and taking the time, God, and I pray that this conversation would be helpful for them in being able to take action or to have conversations, Lord. And we just thank you for the work that you have done in our lives, Lord. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. And so in Hebrew, when you translate the word amen, it means it is established. So we thank you in advance, Lord. It's established. Amen and amen. Y'all have a blessed day.